The email arrived at 11:47 p.m. Emergency board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp. No explanation. No agenda. Just a tersely worded message from my own husband, Daniel, the COO of Evergreen Innovations, the company I had founded with nothing but a prototype and a dream 5 years ago. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I stared at my phone in our darkened bedroom, the blue light illuminating Daniel's empty side of the bed. He'd claimed he was working late again, third time this week. My stomach tightened as I scrolled through the recipient list. Every board member was included. Every board member except me. My name is Rebecca Mitchell. Everyone calls me Becca. 5 years ago, I developed a breakthrough technology in sustainable energy storage, a more efficient battery made from recycled materials that could help solve the intermittency issues plaguing renewable energy. My father, Walter Stevens, a titan in the traditional energy sector, called it a cute science project. My husband thought it was an interesting hobby. Neither believed it could become a viable business. I mortgaged our condo, emptied my savings, and started Evergreen Innovations in our garage. The first 2 years were brutal. 16-hour days, countless rejections from investors, and technical failures that sent me back to the drawing board again and again. But I persisted. The breakthrough came when a small solar company agreed to pilot my technology. The results exceeded even my expectations. Orders started trickling in. By year 3, we had 15 employees and our first real office in downtown Seattle. That's when Daniel suddenly took an interest. He'd grown restless at his corporate job and suggested joining Evergreen as COO. "You handle the technical side, I'll handle the business side," he proposed. My father, who had reluctantly invested, once he saw other investors coming on board, supported the idea. "You need someone with real business experience," he insisted. I had my reservations, but I was drowning in operational details while trying to lead product development. Having Daniel take over operations seemed logical. My father joined the board as chairman, leveraging his connections to open doors for us. Evergreen grew rapidly. By our 5th year, we had 75 employees, a beautiful headquarters overlooking Puget Sound, and a growing list of high-profile clients. The first subtle shifts in power were so gradual I barely noticed them. Daniel began excluding me from meetings with key investors. My father started questioning my technical decisions in board meetings. Vendors I'd never approved appeared. On our payroll, when I raised concerns, Daniel would smile that charming smile that had first attracted me to him and say, "Just trust me, honey. I'm just trying to free you up to do what you do best." What I didn't realize was that I was being systematically sidelined in my own company. I slipped out of bed the night of that cryptic email and padded to my home office. Something was wrong, and I needed to understand what before walking into whatever awaited me the next day. I logged into our company server and began combing through emails, meeting notes, anything that might give me a clue. At 2:14 a.m., I found it. A presentation titled Evergreen Restructuring, Confidential, in Daniel's private folder. I hesitated. Before opening it, my heart pounding in my ears. The first slide hit me like a physical blow. Transition plan, leadership realignment. There it was in meticulous detail. A plan to remove me as CEO and reallocate my responsibilities between Daniel and a new chief technology officer they planned to hire. My role would become founder and technical advisor, a figurehead position, with no real power. The architect of this plan? My husband and my father. The very people who should have been my strongest allies. I continued scrolling through the document, my shock turning to cold fury. The justification section cited my lack of business acumen and inability to scale leadership with company growth. They had charts, graphs, and quotes from selected board members supporting their case. They'd been building this case for months. I sat back in my chair, the blue light of my monitor illuminating the room. 5 years of my life. My invention. My vision. My endless nights and scarified weekends. And they were planning to take it all away because they didn't think I was business-minded enough to lead it anymore. I was still staring at the screen when I heard the front door open. Daniel was home. I closed the file and shut down my computer. I couldn't confront him now. Not yet. I needed a plan. As I slipped back into bed and pretended to be asleep, one thing became crystal clear. I would not go quietly. The boardroom was suffocating the next morning. 8 people seated around a gleaming walnut table, all avoiding my eyes as I entered exactly at 9 a.m. Daniel sat at one end, my father at the other. Sophia Williams, our newest board member and the former CFO of a major tech company, gave me a small, puzzled smile. The others, 2 venture capitalists who'd joined in our Series B funding round, our company lawyer Marcus Johnson, and 2 industry experts my father had recruited, studied their tablets with sudden, intense interest. "Becca, thank you for joining us," Daniel said, as if I were a guest in a meeting about the company I had founded. "We have some important matters to discuss regarding Evergreen's future." I took my seat, placing my phone carefully on the table. So I gathered from the rather cryptic meeting invitation. Would someone care to explain why the CEO of this company wasn't consulted before calling an emergency board meeting? My father cleared his throat. "Becca, there's no need for that tone. We're all here because we care deeply about Evergreen's success." "Then let's skip the preamble, Dad," I said, using the paternal title deliberately, watching him wince at the reminder of our relationship in this professional setting. "What exactly is this meeting about?" Daniel launched into a well-rehearsed speech about growth challenges, scaling issues, and the need for organizational maturity. He pulled up the same presentation I had discovered the night before, though with a few slides strategically removed. The ones that outlined exactly how they planned to push me out. "So in conclusion," Daniel said 30 minutes later, "the executive committee is proposing a restructuring of leadership roles to better position Evergreen for its next growth phase." The executive committee consisted of Daniel and my father. I had been conveniently excluded from that as well. I waited until he finished, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably before speaking. "That was a very thorough presentation, Daniel. But you seem to have left out some key slides, particularly the ones detailing how you plan to remove me as CEO and reduce me to a figurehead role." The room went still. My father's face darkened. Daniel's professional mask slipped for just a moment, confusion and alarm flashing across his features before he regained composure. "I don't know what you're talking about, Becca. Nobody is trying to remove you. This is about adding structure and support so you can focus on innovation rather than day-to-day operations." I pulled out my tablet and projected my own screen to the room's display. "Then perhaps you can explain this document I found on the company server last night, titled Evergreen Restructuring, Confidential." I displayed the complete presentation, including the damning slides they had omitted. Sophia Williams leaned forward, her brow furrowed as she read the screen. One of the venture capitalists whispered something to his colleague. Marcus, our lawyer, was suddenly very interested in his coffee cup. My father recovered first. "Becca, you're overreacting. This was merely a draft, one of several scenarios we were considering." "Really?" I cut him off, flipping to a slide showing a timeline. "Because according to this, you've already approached Thomas Rivera from Suntech about taking the CTO role. That would absorb most of my current responsibilities. There's even an executed non-disclosure agreement dated 3 weeks ago." Daniel stood up, trying to regain control of the room. "This is getting off track. The point is that Evergreen needs seasoned executive leadership to reach its potential. Becca, you're brilliant with technology, but managing a company of this size requires different skills." "Skills like going behind the founder's back to orchestrate a coup?" I asked, my voice steady despite the anger and hurt churning inside. "Me. Skills like manipulating board members with selective information? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "That's enough," my father thundered, slapping his hand on the table. "This is exactly the kind of emotional reaction that proves our point. Business decisions can't be based on feelings, Rebecca." I looked around the room, taking in each face. The venture capitalists looked uncomfortable but not surprised. They'd clearly been briefed beforehand. Marcus was studying a legal pad, his pen motionless. Only Sophia seemed genuinely shocked by the unfolding drama. "Before we go any further," I said, my hand moving to my phone, "there's something everyone should hear." I pressed play, and Daniel's voice filled the room. "Walter, we need to move faster. She's starting to ask questions about the new vendor contracts. No, she doesn't suspect anything about the CEO transition yet. I've been meeting with board members individually. James and Philip are on board. They see the valuation upside once we put a seasoned CEO in place. The key is positioning it as her idea, making her think she's deciding to step back. Trust me, by this time next month, we'll have her focused on R&D where she belongs, and we can run this company properly." The recording ended. Daniel's face had drained of color. My father looked as though he might explode. "That's illegal," Daniel finally sputtered. "You can't record private conversations." "Actually," Marcus interrupted, finally looking up from his legal pad, "Washington is a one-party consent state. If Rebecca was a party to the conversation, the recording is perfectly legal." "I wasn't a party to it," I said quietly. "You were having this conversation in our home office when you thought I was out. But our smart home system caught it and sent an alert about activity. Imagine my surprise when I checked the security log." Daniel's expression hardened from shock to cold anger. "So what now, Becca? You think playing this recording changes anything? The concerns about your leadership are still valid. This company has outgrown you." I stood up, gathering my things. "No, Daniel, this company hasn't outgrown me. You and my father have simply outgrown your integrity." I turned to the other board members. "I'm calling for an official board vote on the leadership structure of Evergreen Innovations. As per our bylaws, such a vote requires 1 week's notice. We'll reconvene next Friday at 9 a.m. Until then, I suggest everyone review the company's actual performance metrics, patent portfolio, and client satisfaction scores, all of which have improved quarter over quarter under my leadership." As I headed for the door, my father called out, "Where are you going? We're not finished here." I paused, looking back at the man who had never believed in me and the husband who had betrayed me. "Actually, we are finished for today. I have a company to run, and unlike some people in this room, I do it transparently and with integrity." The door closed behind me with a satisfying click. My hands were shaking, but my mind was crystal clear. I had 7 days to save my company, and I wasn't going down without a fight. I'm not sure how I made it through the rest of that day. I walked directly from the boardroom to my office, closed the door, and allowed myself exactly 5 minutes to fall apart. 5 minutes to feel the crushing weight of betrayal from the 2 men I should have been able to trust most. 5 minutes to wonder how I had been so blind. Then I dried my tears, fixed my makeup, and called in my executive assistant, Olivia Chen. "I need you to clear my calendar for the next 3 days except for essential client meetings," I told her. "And I need absolute discretion about what I'm about to tell you." Olivia had been with me since the garage days. She'd worked for equity when I couldn't afford to pay her a proper salary. If there was anyone at Evergreen I could trust completely, it was her. I explained the situation in precise, unemotional terms. As I spoke, Olivia's expression changed from shock to determination. "Those bastards," she said when I finished. It was the first time I'd ever heard her swear. "What do you need me to do?" "Everything," I admitted. I need to understand exactly what's been happening behind my back. I need data on every aspect of this company's performance. I need to know which board members are firmly in Daniel and my father's camp, and which might be persuadable. Olivia was already typing notes on her tablet. I've had concerns about some of the decisions coming from Daniel's office. The new marketing vendor, for instance. They're charging us 3 times what our previous agency did, with worse results. And they happen to be owned by a college friend of Daniel's. I raised an eyebrow. Why didn't you tell me? I tried, she said gently. 3 weeks ago. You told me to take it up with Daniel since operations was his domain. The realization hit me hard. I had participated in my own sidelining by gradually ceding territory, trusting Daniel to act in the company's best interest, in our best interest, while he was actually orchestrating my removal. That changes today, I said firmly. I'm still the CEO, and it's time I started acting like it. The next 3 days were a whirlwind of discovery. Olivia and I worked late into the night, combing through contracts, financial reports, and communication records. What we found was disturbing. Daniel had been systematically inserting his allies into key positions throughout the company. Vendor contracts had been awarded to friends or companies willing to give him personal favors. My father had been using his position as chairman to redirect our business development efforts toward his traditional energy contacts, effectively slowing our expansion into the more innovative sectors I had always targeted. More concerning were the conversations with investors that I had been excluded from. Daniel had been suggesting to key investors that my technical vision was too narrow, that I was resistant to the necessary pivots for larger market capture. None of this was illegal. Exactly. Just deceitful. A carefully orchestrated campaign to diminish my influence and authority while building the case for my removal. By Thursday evening, I had compiled a comprehensive report detailing the company's true performance under my leadership, the questionable decisions made by Daniel without proper authorization, and the conflict of interest in my father's board activities. I had also spoken privately with Sophia Williams, who was horrified by what I shared and pledged her support. Marcus Johnson, our company lawyer, requested a private meeting away from the office. We met at a small coffee shop in a neighborhood far from our usual haunts. I can't officially advise you against other company executives, he said carefully. That would be a conflict of interest. But as someone who was there from the beginning, I felt you should know that I've been increasingly uncomfortable with some of the legal directions I've been given by Daniel and your father. He slid a folder across the table. This isn't coming from me as Evergreen's counsel. This is just one professional respecting another's right to be fully informed. The folder contained draft documents for a holding company structure that would have effectively diluted my ownership and control without my knowledge. It hadn't been implemented yet, but the groundwork was being laid. Thank you, Marcus, I said, my voice steady despite the fresh wave of betrayal I felt. I appreciate your professional courtesy. He nodded, standing to leave. The board meeting tomorrow will be contentious. Just remember that in corporate governance, information and preparation usually win the day. I spent that night in my home office, finalizing my presentation and strategy for the board meeting. Daniel didn't come home. He'd been staying at a hotel since the confrontation, claiming he needed space to think. In reality, I suspected he was working with my father to salvage their plan. At 3 a.m., I took a break and wandered to the floor-to-ceiling windows of our condo, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The lights blurred as tears filled my eyes. How had my marriage become so hollow that my husband could betray me like this? How had my relationship with my father deteriorated to the point where he would try to push me out of my own company rather than take pride in what I had built? I allowed myself 30 minutes of grief. Then I got back to work. Friday morning arrived cold and rainy, typical Seattle weather, but it felt appropriate for the battle ahead. I dressed carefully, a charcoal gray suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Professional, authoritative, ready for war. I arrived at the office an hour early. Olivia was already there, printer warm from producing the document. Packets I would distribute to each board member. The evergreen logo gleamed on the cover of each folder, the logo I had designed myself in those early garage days, representing growth and sustainability. "Everything's ready," Olivia assured. "The presentation is loaded on the boardroom system and backed up on your tablet. Coffee and breakfast are ordered. And—" She hesitated, then continued with a small smile. "I may have accidentally scheduled the IT maintenance for Daniel's presentation laptop for this morning." I gave her a grateful look. "What would I do without you?" "Let's make sure you never have to find out," she replied. At precisely 8:55 a.m., I entered the boardroom. The same 8 people from the previous week were seated around the table. Daniel and my father were huddled at one end, looking confident. They had undoubtedly spent the week shoring up their support. They thought they knew exactly how this meeting would go. They were wrong. As the meeting was called to order, I took control immediately. "Before we proceed with the vote that was called last week, I'd like to distribute some important information and make a brief presentation." Daniel frowned. "We should follow proper procedure. The motion on the table is—" "The motion," I interrupted, "was for a board vote on the leadership structure of Evergreen Innovations. And as the current CEO, I have the right to present relevant information before that vote takes place." I nodded to Olivia, who began distributing the folders. "What's this?" my father demanded, flipping through the contents. "That, Walter, is a comprehensive analysis of Evergreen's performance under my leadership, including metrics that were conspicuously missing from the presentation given last week." I moved to the head of the table, taking the position my father usually occupied. "It also includes documentation of numerous operational decisions made without proper authorization, conflicts of interest, and actions taken specifically to undermine my authority as CEO." I launched into my presentation, methodically laying out the case for my continued leadership. I presented the growth metrics, the client acquisition numbers, the glowing testimonials from major customers. Then I pivoted to the concerning patterns in Daniel's management, the questionable vendor contracts, the strategic exclusion of me from investor meetings, the gradual insertion of his allies into key positions. And most disturbing of all, I continued, pulling up an email exchange between Daniel and my father, is this discussion of creating a new holding company structure that would have diluted my ownership without my knowledge or consent. Daniel's face had grown increasingly red. "Where did you get that email? You've been spying on company communications?" "No, Daniel, I've been doing my job as CEO by reviewing concerning activities that impact this company's governance." I turned to face the entire board. "The question before us isn't whether Evergreen needs strong leadership. It's whether that leadership should come from the founder who has consistently delivered results, or from 2 individuals who have demonstrated they're willing to put personal control above company interests." Sophia Williams spoke up. "I've reviewed Rebecca's documentation thoroughly, and I find the pattern concerning. At minimum, there appears to be a serious breakdown in communication and transparency." One of the venture capitalists shifted uncomfortably. "Daniel assured us that these restructuring discussions were being conducted with your knowledge, Rebecca." "Clearly they were not," I replied. "And that's precisely the problem. How can a company succeed when its executives are working at cross purposes, hiding information from each other?" My father stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. Rebecca is twisting normal business operations into some sort of conspiracy. The fact remains that Evergreen needs seasoned business leadership to reach its potential. Her technical skills are valuable, but what, Dad?" I challenged. "Not valuable enough to actually lead? Just valuable enough to exploit while you and Daniel take control?" I turned back to the board. "Let me be very clear. I founded this company. My patents form the core of our technology. Our clients work with us largely because of my technical vision and reputation in the industry. If this board votes to remove me as CEO, I will remain on as required by my contract, but my energy and innovations will go elsewhere when that contract expires. The threat hung in the air. Everyone in that room knew that without my continued technical leadership and future innovations, Evergreen's growth trajectory would flatten dramatically. Daniel tried a different approach, his voice softening. Becca, this doesn't have to be adversarial. We all want what's best for Evergreen. Perhaps we can find a compromise. I offered compromise for years, Daniel. I cut him off. Every time I let you take over another aspect of operations. Every time I deferred to my father's business experience. That approach led us here, to a secret plan to push me out of my own company. So no, I'm not interested in another compromise that gradually diminishes my role. I placed my hands flat on the table and looked each board member in the eye. It's time to vote. The motion is simple. Do you support the current leadership structure with me as CEO? Or do you support the restructuring plan proposed by Daniel and Walter? The venture capitalists exchanged glances. Marcus studied the documentation intently. Sophia nodded slightly to me. Before we vote, Sophia said, I'd like to propose an alternative. Given the serious concerns raised today about transparency and governance, perhaps what Evergreen needs isn't a completely new leadership structure, but rather clearer boundaries and accountability within the current one. She outlined a proposal. I would remain as CEO with full authority over product, development, strategic direction, and client relationships. Daniel would continue as COO, but with more defined limitations and reporting requirements. An independent audit would review the concerning contracts and decisions. And most importantly, my father would step down as chairman to be replaced by an independent director. A stunned silence followed her proposal. I could support that approach, said one of the venture capitalists finally. The other nodded. Absolutely not, my father thundered. This is my company too. I provided the connections, the credibility. After I had already proven the technology worked, I reminded him. After I had secured our first clients with no help from you. You invested because you didn't want to miss out on the returns. Not because you believed in me. The vote that followed wasn't even close. Sophia's proposal passed 5-2, with only Daniel and my father opposing. As the meeting adjourned, my father stormed out without a word. Daniel lingered, his expression, a mixture of anger and calculation. This isn't over, Becca, he said quietly. The company still needs what I bring to the table. You're right about one thing, I replied. It isn't over, but Evergreen will now move forward with integrity and transparency. Whether you're part of that future is up to you. As I watched my husband walk away, I felt no triumph, only resolve. The company I had built would continue under my leadership. The vision I had fought for would remain intact. But the personal cost had been enormous. I returned to my office to find a small plant on my desk, a miniature evergreen tree with a note from Olivia. Some things grow stronger after a fire. I smiled, touching one of the vibrant green needles. She was right. This crisis had burned away illusions and falsehoods, leaving only the truth exposed. And from that truth, something stronger could grow. The next 6 months brought significant changes to Evergreen Innovations. The independent audit revealed even more concerning decisions than I had discovered, leading to the termination of several questionable contracts. Daniel ultimately resigned as COO, unable to accept the new limitations on his authority. Our divorce proceedings began shortly after. My father remained on the board, but as a regular member without the chairman title. Our relationship remained strained, but a new, cautious respect began to develop as he watched me lead the company through this transition, without faltering. Sophia Williams became our new chairperson, bringing valuable perspective and corporate governance experience. Under our restructured leadership, Evergreen secured its largest contract yet, a partnership with a major utility company to deploy our energy storage technology across 3 states. On the 1-year anniversary of that fateful board meeting, we moved into a new headquarters, a completely sustainable building that showcased our technology throughout its operations. As I stood addressing our now 120 employees at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I could see Olivia in the front row, smiling proudly. Evergreen was founded on a simple belief, I told the assembled crowd, that innovation thrives best when it grows from authentic vision and integrity. The past year tested that belief severely. But standing here today, looking at what we've built together, I can say with certainty that we've proven it true. Later, in my new office with its view of Mount Rainier in the distance, Sophia stopped by with a bottle of champagne. "To surviving a corporate coup," she said, pouring 2 glasses. "To thriving despite it," I corrected, taking one. She studied me for a moment. "You know, when I joined this board, Walter told me you were brilliant but naive, that you needed guidance and protection from the harsh realities of business." I laughed. "And what do you think now?" "I think," she said thoughtfully, "that you're one of the most formidable executives I've ever worked with. You faced betrayal from those closest to you, and instead of crumbling, you used it to build something stronger." I gazed out at the mountain, solid and enduring on the horizon. The hardest part wasn't saving the company. It was accepting that the 2 people I should have been able to trust most were the ones plotting against me. "And yet here you are," Sophia said, raising her glass. "Stronger, wiser, still standing." "Still growing," I corrected, thinking of the little evergreen tree that still sat on my desk, now twice its original size. That's the thing about being underestimated. When people don't believe you can weather the storm, they never see you coming when you do. We clinked glasses as the setting sun painted the mountain in shades of gold and pink, a beautiful ending to a day that had once seemed impossible. The company that had almost been taken from me was now flourishing under my leadership. The vision that had been dismissed as a cute science project was now revolutionizing energy storage across multiple states. Sometimes, I realized, the most powerful growth comes after the most devastating fires. And sometimes, the recording that changes everything isn't just the one that exposes a betrayal, it's the record you create afterward, proving just how wrong they were to underestimate you in the first place. The board meeting had ended, but the war had just begun. As I packed up my presentation materials, I could feel the weight of every eye in the room. Some gazes held newfound respect, others simmering resentment. The recording had changed everything, not just the outcome of the vote, but the very foundation of relationships I had trusted for years. "Impressive performance," Sophia said quietly as the others filed out. "But you know this is only the first battle." I nodded, sliding my tablet into my leather portfolio. "Daniel and my father won't accept defeat easily." "Which is why you need to move quickly," she advised. "They'll be regrouping as we speak." She was right, of course. The victory I'd secured today was precarious. I had exposed their plan and temporarily maintained my position, but Daniel still held significant operational control, and my father's influence with key investors remained strong. They had lost this round, but they had resources, connections, and most importantly, a wounded pride that would demand satisfaction. I left the boardroom with my head high, feeling the curious stares of employees who surely sensed the tension radiating from behind those closed doors. News travels fast in any organization, but especially in one experiencing a power struggle at the top. I needed to address the situation before rumors and speculation could take root. Back in my office, I called an emergency all-hands meeting for 4 p.m. Then I summoned my executive team, minus Daniel, for immediate briefing. As I waited for them to arrive, Olivia appeared with a steaming cup of tea and a concerned expression. "The vultures are already circling," she said, placing the tea on my desk. "Daniel's been in his office with the door locked since the meeting ended. He's made at least 4 calls that I know of." "To whom?" "James Peterson from Axion Ventures for sure. I recognized his assistant when she called back to confirm a dinner meeting tonight. And I think your father as well." The others, I couldn't tell. Axion Ventures was our second largest investor after my father. James Peterson had always been cordial to me, but clearly preferred dealing with Daniel. Their sudden dinner plans suggested alliance building, perhaps an attempt to pressure the board from the investor side. "What's your next move?" Olivia asked. I sipped the tea, letting its warmth steady me. "First, information control. We need our narrative established before Daniel and my father can spin this their way. Then, operational reclamation. I need to understand exactly what's been happening in the departments Daniel has been controlling. And finally, strategic reinforcement. We need allies, both inside and outside the company." My executive team arrived looking nervous. Our Chief Marketing Officer, Eliza Bennett, Chief Financial Officer, Raymond Park, and Head of Engineering, Jason Lau. I'd handpicked each of them, but over the past year, Daniel had cultivated his own relationships with them, often excluding me from their discussions. I wasn't sure where their loyalties truly lay. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," I began. "I'll be direct. This morning, the board voted down a restructuring proposal that would have removed me as CEO and significantly altered our leadership structure. This proposal was initiated by Daniel and Walter without my knowledge." Their expressions ranged from shock to carefully neutral. Only Jason looked genuinely surprised, which told me the others had at least suspected something was brewing. "Moving forward, there will be significant changes in how we operate as a leadership team. Complete transparency will be non-negotiable. I'll be taking a more active role in operations until we can hire a new COO." "A new COO?" Raymond echoed. "So Daniel is leaving?" "That remains to be seen," I answered carefully. "For now, he remains in his position, but with more clearly defined boundaries and reporting structures." I outlined the immediate changes. Daily executive briefings directly with me, a comprehensive review of all vendor contracts and strategic initiatives, and a temporary freeze on any new operational decisions until I could properly assess our current position. "We have an all-hands meeting at 4 p.m., I concluded. "I expect each of you to demonstrate unified leadership, regardless of your personal feelings about today's events. Our employees deserve stability and clear direction." As they filed out, I asked Eliza to stay behind. As CMO, she controlled our public messaging and brand positioning, critical components in the days ahead. "Where do you stand in all this, Eliza?" I asked once we were alone. She hesitated, then sighed. "Daniel approached me 3 weeks ago. He said changes were coming and implied I should align myself accordingly if I wanted to advance." "And did you? Align yourself accordingly?" I told him I'd consider my options. Her gaze was direct now. "But I've been with Evergreen since we had 20 employees. I've watched you build something remarkable. Daniel has skills, yes, but this company reflects your vision, not his." I studied her, looking for any sign of deception. "I need to know I can trust you, especially now. Our external communications will be crucial in the coming weeks." "You can," she said firmly. "And not just because I believe in you personally. The simple fact is that Evergreen without Rebecca Mitchell isn't Evergreen anymore. It's just another energy storage company without its innovative edge." The all-hands meeting was a masterclass in controlled messaging. I stood before our 75 employees and addressed the situation head-on, without vilifying Daniel or my father directly. "As some of you may have heard, there have been discussions at the board level about Evergreen's leadership structure," I began. "I want to assure everyone that these discussions have been resolved. I remain as CEO, fully committed to our mission of revolutionizing energy storage with sustainable solutions." I acknowledged that organizational changes would be coming. Increased reporting transparency, a review of recent strategic decisions, and a renewed focus on our core technological advantages. Change can be unsettling, I concluded, but Evergreen's foundation remains strong. Our technology is groundbreaking. Our team is exceptional. And our vision, a world where renewable energy can be stored efficiently and sustainably, is more important than ever. Throughout my address, I noticed Daniel standing at the back of the room, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He made no attempt to speak, which was telling in itself. The power dynamic between us had shifted dramatically in just a few hours, and he was recalculating his position. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 6 a.m., determined to get a head start before the day's inevitable confrontations began. To my surprise, Daniel was already there, sitting in the small conference room adjacent to my office, reviewing documents. "Early start," I commented, pausing in the doorway. He looked up, his expression neutral. "We need to talk, Becca." "I agree." I entered and closed the door behind me. "But first, I should inform you that all of our conversations going forward should be considered on the record." A flash of anger crossed his face. "Is that really necessary? Despite what you may think, I'm not the villain in this story. And yet you secretly planned to remove me from my position while presenting a very different face to me at home. So yes, I think it's necessary." He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture that had once seemed endearing, but now looked calculated, part of the charming persona he had cultivated. "What happened at the board meeting was unfortunate," he said finally. "Things escalated, in ways I hadn't intended. Walter pushed for a more aggressive approach than I was comfortable with." "Don't," I cut him off. "Don't try to rewrite history or distance yourself from actions that are thoroughly documented. You were the architect of most of this plan. My father provided the leverage, but the strategy had your fingerprints all over it." "Fine," he conceded, dropping the conciliatory act. "Yes, I believed, and still believe, that Evergreen needs different leadership to reach its potential. The board disagreed, at least for now. So the question is, where do we go from here?" "That depends on you," I replied. "I'm prepared to continue working with you as COO under the new parameters established by the board. Complete transparency, clearly defined authority boundaries, regular reporting. If you can operate within those constraints, we can move forward professionally. And if I can't, then you should resign." He studied me with narrowed eyes, as if seeing me for the first time. Perhaps he was. The woman he had married, the technical founder he had thought he could easily manipulate, had revealed herself to be more formidable than he had calculated. "I'll need time to consider my options," he said eventually. "Of course. Take the weekend. I expect your decision by Monday morning." As he stood to leave, he paused. "Your father is furious. You—" "No. He sees this as a personal betrayal." I met his gaze steadily. Considering he was planning to betray me first, I find that rather ironic. After Daniel left, I turned my attention to the mountain of work ahead. The more I looked into the operations he had been controlling, the more concerning patterns emerged. Vendor contracts with inexplicably high fees, strategic initiatives that diverted resources from our core technology development, systematic exclusion of certain departments, particularly engineering, from decision-making processes. It wasn't embezzlement or fraud, Daniel was too smart for that, but it was a clear pattern of decisions that consolidated his control while gradually diminishing the company's reliance on my technical leadership. If his plan had succeeded, he would have been able to argue that I had already been effectively removed from day-to-day operations with no negative impact. By noon, I had requested detailed reports from each department head and scheduled individual meetings throughout the following week. I needed to re-establish relationships with the teams that had been gradually pulled into Daniel's orbit, to remind them of the vision that had brought many of them to Evergreen in the first place. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Coffee 2 p.m. Westlake Park. Important information about EI, come alone." I showed the message to Olivia, who frowned. Could be a trap, or a distraction. Or it could be someone with helpful information who doesn't want to be seen meeting me, I countered. "Either way, I need to know." "Then I'm coming with you," she insisted. "I'll stay at a distance, but close enough to intervene if necessary." Westlake Park was busy with Friday afternoon visitors enjoying the rare October sunshine. I spotted him immediately. Thomas Rivera, the engineer Daniel and my father had approached about taking the CTO role that would have absorbed most of my responsibilities. He was sitting alone at a small table, sunglasses on despite the overcast day, nervously checking his watch. "Mr. Rivera," I said, approaching the table. "This is unexpected." He gestured to the empty chair across from him. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Mitchell. I wasn't sure you would. That depends on what important information you have about my company." He glanced around, then leaned forward. "I turned them down, the CTO position. Something felt off about the way they approached me, all the secrecy. And I respect your work too much to participate in whatever game they were playing." "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "But that doesn't explain this cloak and dagger meeting. After I declined, your husband approached me again. Not with a job offer this time, but with a different proposition. He wanted access to the battery research my team has been developing at Suntech. He suggested a partnership that would give Evergreen access to our newer lithium polymer designs." I felt a chill despite the sun on my face. My own patents formed the core of Evergreen's technology, a breakthrough in sustainable energy storage that didn't rely on rare earth metals or toxic components. It was what made us unique in the market. But Daniel had always pushed for us to develop more conventional battery technologies alongside my sustainable designs, arguing that we needed to diversify. What exactly did he offer in exchange for? "This partnership?" I asked. "That's the interesting part. Not money, not technology exchange. He offered equity in what he called New Evergreen, a restructured company that would emerge after the leadership transition." So that was the play. Daniel and my father hadn't just been planning to sideline me. They had been preparing to fundamentally alter Evergreen's technological direction once I was out of the way. My sustainable vision would have been diluted by conventional battery technology, allowing them to scale more quickly, but abandoning the core innovation that made us special. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because what you've built matters," he said simply. "The industry needs more founders who refuse to compromise on sustainability, not fewer. And because what they were planning felt wrong, unethical. Maybe your competitor in some ways, but I believe in integrity in business." As Rivera left, I sat for a moment, processing this new information. Daniel's betrayal ran even deeper than I had realized. It wasn't just about control or power. It was about fundamentally changing the company I had created, erasing my vision and replacing it with something more conventional, more immediately profitable, but ultimately less revolutionary. I returned to the office with renewed determination. This wasn't just a fight for my position or my company anymore. It was a fight for the vision that had driven me to start Evergreen in the first place, a sustainable approach to energy storage that could help transform how the world used renewable power. When I stepped off the elevator, I immediately sensed something was wrong. The usual Friday afternoon buzz of activity had been replaced by tense silence. As I approached the executive suite, Olivia intercepted me, her expression grave. "What happened?" I asked. "Daniel called an impromptu meeting with the sales and marketing teams while you were out. He's positioned this morning's events as a temporary misunderstanding that will be resolved shortly." He implied to key team members that the board's decision might be reversed. "On what grounds?" He mentioned concerns from major investors and suggested that another board meeting might be called once the full financial implications were made clear. So that was his strategy: create uncertainty, imply that my position remained precarious, and undermine the clarity I had tried to establish in the all-hands meeting. Classic destabilization tactics. Where is he now? He left about 20 minutes ago. Said he had an external meeting. Probably with my father and James Peterson from Axion Ventures, I thought, building their coalition. I spent the rest of the afternoon meeting individually with the team members Daniel had spoken to, clarifying the board's decision and my continuing role as CEO. Most seemed relieved by the direct communication, though a few, particularly those Daniel had personally hired, remained noticeably reserved. By 7 p.m., I was exhausted, but satisfied that I had contained the immediate damage. I was gathering my things to leave when Raymond, our CFO, appeared in my doorway. "Do you have a minute?" he asked, his usually confident demeanor subdued. "Of course. What's on your mind, Raymond?" He closed the door and took a seat across from me. "There's something you should know. About 6 weeks ago, Daniel asked me to prepare financial projections for a presentation to private investors, not our current investors, new ones he was approaching independently." I felt a spike of alarm. "What kind of projections?" "Aggressive growth scenarios based on a significant technological pivot. The models assumed we would be licensing conventional battery technology and gradually shifting away from your sustainable designs except as a specialty product line." It confirmed what Rivera had told me. Daniel had been laying groundwork on multiple fronts. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral despite my rising anger. Raymond looked genuinely uncomfortable. Daniel said, "You had approved the exploratory analysis but wanted to keep it quiet until the details were finalized. He implied it was a sensitive pivot you weren't ready to announce more broadly." The manipulation was breathtaking in its thoroughness. Daniel had used my name to authorize his shadow plans, knowing that most employees would trust that we were aligned as husband and wife, as founder and COO. "And you believed him." "I had no reason not to," Raymond said defensively. "You two presented a united front in all our executive meetings. He spoke for you often when you weren't present, and you never contradicted him. The boundaries weren't clear." He was right, and the realization stung. I had allowed those boundaries to blur, had tacitly granted Daniel authority to speak for me by not more actively maintaining my leadership visibility. The technical work I loved had become an excuse to withdraw from the business operations that Daniel had seemed more than willing to handle. "I'm telling you now because I want you to know where I stand," Raymond continued. "I believe in the company you founded, Rebecca, the sustainable vision, the ethical approach. If we're choosing sides, I'm on yours." After Raymond left, I remained at my desk, thinking about the path forward. The immediate crisis had been averted, but the underlying issues remained. Daniel still held significant operational control. My father still wielded influence with key investors, and most concerning, the foundation of trust within the company had been severely damaged. I needed to reclaim not just my authority, but the heart and soul of Evergreen, the vision that had inspired our earliest employees and attracted our most loyal customers. My phone rang, my father's number. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Hello, Dad." "This isn't over, Rebecca." His voice carried the cold authority that had intimidated me since childhood. "You've made a serious mistake going public with private board discussions. The investors won't stand for this kind of drama." "Is that why you're calling? More threats?" "I'm calling to give you one last chance to be reasonable. Step back gracefully. Take the technical advisory role. Let Daniel and the new CTO handle the business aspects. Everyone saves face, and the company thrives." "The board already voted against that plan," I reminded him. "Or did you forget this morning's meeting?" Boards can change their minds when presented with new information, like the fact that Axion Ventures is reconsidering their next funding round based on recent events. So that was what Daniel's dinner meeting had accomplished, leveraging James Peterson's influence to pressure me through threatened withdrawal of funding. If Axion's support depends on removing the founder whose technology makes this company valuable in the first place, perhaps we need different investors, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Don't be naive," my father snapped. "Funding is the lifeblood of a growing tech company. Without Axion's next round, your expansion plans are dead in the water. Then we'll find alternative funding. From investors who believe in our core vision, not just quarterly returns. He made a dismissive noise. Good luck with that. Sustainable technology is a nice marketing angle, but serious investors want serious returns. Daniel understands that. You never have. After we hung up, I sat in my darkened office, the skyline of Seattle glittering beyond my window. My father's words echoed in my mind, old doubts stirring beneath my newfound resolve. Had I been naive? Was my commitment to sustainable technology limiting Evergreen's potential? Would my stand against Daniel and my father ultimately harm the company I had sacrificed so much to build? My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. How are you holding? Up, I typed back. Dealing with aftershocks. Daniel's already campaigning with the team. My father's threatening investor issues. Her response was immediate. Expected, but remember why you founded Evergreen in the first place. That vision matters, and it's more commercially viable now than ever. She was right. The market for sustainable technologies had grown exponentially since I'd started Evergreen. What had once been a niche concern was now mainstream, with major corporations and governments worldwide committing to green initiatives. My original vision wasn't just idealistic, it was increasingly practical. The technology I had developed offered a genuine competitive advantage in a growing market. Daniel and my father wanted to dilute that advantage for the sake of faster scaling and quicker returns, but in doing so, they would have sacrificed our unique position. I opened my laptop and began typing. If Daniel and my father wanted a battle of narratives, I would give them one. But mine would be rooted in the truth of what made Evergreen special. By the time the office began stirring with Monday morning, activity. I had completed a comprehensive strategic vision document reaffirming our commitment to sustainable technology while outlining a practical growth path that didn't compromise those values. I had also drafted a transparent communication explaining the recent leadership tensions and my unwavering commitment to the company's founding principles. Daniel arrived at precisely 8:30 a.m., impeccably dressed as always, and came directly to my office. I've made my decision, he announced without preamble. And? I'm staying. He took a seat without being invited. But we need to establish some ground rules if this is going to work. I agree completely, I said, sliding a document across the desk to him. These are the operational boundaries approved by the board. Your areas of authority, reporting requirements, and approval processes are clearly outlined. If you choose to continue as COO, these will be effective immediately. He glanced at the document, his jaw tightening. These restrictions are excessive. They're necessary given recent events, I countered. You've demonstrated you can't be trusted with the level of autonomy you previously enjoyed. And if I refuse to accept these terms? Then the board has authorized me to appoint an interim COO while we search for your replacement. His expression darkened. You've been busy. I've been doing my job as CEO, securing the company's future and stability. He stood, leaving the document untouched on my desk. I'll need to review this with legal counsel before making a final decision. Of course. You have until 5 p.m. tomorrow. After he left, Olivia appeared with a satisfied smile. He seems rattled. Good, I said. But we're not done yet. We need to move forward with the next phase before he and my father can regroup. The next phase was already in motion. While Daniel consulted with his lawyers, I launched a company-wide innovation initiative, personally meeting with engineering teams to reconnect with the technical heart of Evergreen. I reached out to key clients, reassuring them about our continued commitment to the sustainable technology they had invested in. And most importantly, I began discussions with alternative investors who specifically valued our environmental approach. By Tuesday afternoon, I had secured a tentative commitment from Green Future Fund, a venture capital firm specializing in sustainable technologies, to consider leading our next funding round if needed. Their interest validated my belief that Evergreen's value lay in its unique approach, not in diluting that approach for faster growth. At 4:55 p.m., Daniel appeared in my office doorway, his expression unreadable. "I've reviewed the operational boundaries with my attorney," he said, placing a document on my desk. "I've made some proposed amendments." I glanced at the marked-up document. His changes effectively gutted most of the oversight mechanisms and reporting requirements. "These amendments are not acceptable," I said simply. "Then we have an impasse." "No, Daniel, we don't. The board has approved these boundaries as written. Your choice is to accept them or resign. There is no third option." He stared at me for a long moment, calculation visible in his eyes. Finally, he said, "Then I resign, effective immediately." Though I had expected this outcome, had even hoped for it, his words still landed with surprising force. This was the man I had married, had built a life with, had trusted with my company and my heart, and now he was walking away rather than accept transparency and oversight. "I'll have HR prepare the necessary paperwork," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "This isn't the end, Becca," he said, his tone softening slightly. "You're making a mistake letting personal feelings cloud your business judgment. Your father and I were trying to help Evergreen reach its full potential. By going behind my back? By planning to discard the core technology that makes us unique? That's not help, Daniel. That's a hostile takeover. Call it what you want. But without me to bridge the gap with traditional investors and industry partners, you'll find yourself increasingly isolated. Your sustainable vision is admirable, but limited." As he turned to leave, I said, "You never understood what makes Evergreen special. It's not just technology or profit potential. It's integrity. It's commitment to a better way forward. And that's something you and my father could never appreciate." After he left, I sat alone in my office, experiencing a complex mixture of relief, sadness, and determination. Daniel's departure marked the end of a chapter, both professionally and personally, but it also created space for something new to grow. That evening, I called an emergency executive team meeting to announce Daniel's resignation and outline our path forward. I appointed Jason, our head of engineering, as interim COO while we conducted a proper search. "We're entering a new phase. For Evergreen," I told the assembled team. "One that recommits to our founding vision while establishing stronger governance and transparency. The road ahead won't be easy. Daniel and my father still hold influence with certain investors and industry partners. But we have something more valuable, genuine innovation that addresses one of the most pressing challenges of our time." As the meeting concluded, Eliza lingered behind. "Daniel just posted about his departure on LinkedIn. He's framing it as a strategic divergence of vision and hinting at new ventures in the energy storage space." I had expected as much. Let him spin it however he wants. We'll focus on results, not narratives. The weeks that followed were among the most challenging and rewarding of my professional life. Without Daniel's opposing force within the company, I was able to realign our operations with our core vision, refocusing resources on advancing our sustainable technology, rather than diluting it with conventional approaches. The threatened withdrawal of Axion Ventures funding materialized as my father had warned, creating temporary financial pressure. But the tentative interest from Green Future Fund developed into a solid commitment, not just matching Axion's planned investment, but exceeding it by 20%. Their public announcement of the investment included a strong endorsement of Evergreen's sustainable approach, sending a powerful signal to the market. My father maintained his board seat but attended meetings remotely, his influence noticeably diminished. Our relationship remained strained, limited to formal business interactions, each of us unsure how to bridge the chasm that had opened between us, or if it should be bridged at all. 6 weeks after Daniel's departure, I received an unexpected call from Thomas Rivera, the engineer who had warned me about Daniel's technological pivot plans. "I've been following Evergreen's progress," he said. Your recommitment to sustainable storage solutions is impressive. There's actually something I'd like to discuss with you, a potential collaboration rather than competition. My team has developed some complementary technology that might integrate well with your systems. The call led to a promising partnership discussion. Not the equity arrangement Daniel had proposed, but a genuine technological collaboration that respected both companies' independence and shared commitment to sustainability. As I hung up, Olivia appeared in my doorway. The new investor presentation is ready for your review. And Sophia called. The board meeting next week has been confirmed. She says your position as CEO will be formally reaffirmed with expanded authority. I smiled, feeling for the first time in months that Evergreen was truly back on course. The Patisi company I had founded was not just surviving but thriving, its core vision intact, its future bright. The crisis that had begun with a late-night email and a secret restructuring plan had ultimately strengthened both the company and my own leadership. By facing betrayal with determination rather than defeat, I had rediscovered the purpose that had driven me to create Evergreen in the first place. As Seattle's winter rain tapped against my office window, I found myself reflecting on a simple truth. Sometimes the greatest threats to our vision come from those closest to us, those we trust to share and protect that vision. But in defending what matters most, we often discover strengths we never knew we possessed. I opened my laptop and began drafting a new company-wide message, not about the past conflicts, but about the future we were building together. A future where sustainability and success went hand in hand. A future that remained true to the vision that had started in a garage 5 years earlier, when everyone except me had seen only a cute science project instead of a revolution in the making. The revolution was still underway, and this time, nothing would stand in its way. 3 months after Daniel's resignation, Evergreen Innovations had found its new rhythm. Our partnership with Green Future Fund had stabilized our finances and brought in board members who genuinely supported our sustainable vision. Our core technology was advancing rapidly under Jason's leadership as interim COO, with 2 new patents filed and a major contract secured with the Pacific Northwest's largest utility company. From the outside, it appeared we had weathered the storm successfully. But inside, I knew better. The relative calm was deceptive, the peace temporary. Daniel and my father weren't the type of men to accept defeat gracefully, especially at the hands of someone they had underestimated. Their silence wasn't surrender, it was tactical regrouping. My suspicions were confirmed on a rainy Tuesday morning when Olivia rushed into my office, her normally composed demeanor visibly shaken. "You need to see this," she said, placing her tablet in front of me. On the screen was a press release from a newly formed company called Nexus Energy Systems. The founder and CEO, Daniel Mitchell. The chairman of the board, Walter Stevens. The company description made my stomach clench. Pioneering next-generation energy storage solutions that balance innovation with market reality. They had created a direct competitor, positioned to execute the very vision they had tried to impose on Evergreen, conventional battery technology with just enough green marketing to appeal to the mainstream market without the deeper commitment to sustainability that defined our approach. But the most concerning detail came buried in the 3rd paragraph. Leveraging proprietary technology and industry-leading expertise, Nexus Energy Systems is positioned to rapidly capture market share in the expanding energy storage sector. Proprietary technology? Daniel had been privy to all our research and development during his time as COO. While our core patents were secure, he had intimate knowledge of our innovation pipeline, our technical challenges, and our future plans. "There's more," Olivia said, scrolling down to reveal the investor section. Their seed funding round was led by Axion Ventures, with participation from 3 other firms that had previously expressed interest in Evergreen. James Peterson had followed through on his alliance with Daniel, pulling Axion's resources from us to fund our new competitor. It was a calculated move designed not just to establish Nexus as a player, but to actively undermine Evergreen's position in the market. "Have you told the executive team?" I asked. "Not yet. I wanted you to see it first." I took a deep breath, processing the implications. "Call an emergency meeting for noon, and ask Marcus to join us. We need to understand our legal options. If Daniel misappropriates any of our intellectual property." As Olivia left to arrange the meeting, I studied the press release more carefully. The language was carefully crafted to imply innovation without making specific claims that might trigger intellectual property concerns. Daniel had always been skilled at navigating legal boundaries, and this announcement reflected that savvy. More concerning was the list of initial hires: 3 former Evergreen engineers who had been particularly close to Daniel, including one who had been working on a promising new electrode design before abruptly resigning 2 weeks after Daniel's departure. At the time, I had attributed it to natural post-leadership turnover. Now, I recognized it as the first move in a coordinated plan. At noon, our executive team gathered in the conference room, faces grim as I shared the news. "This isn't just competition," I explained. "This is a deliberate attempt to replicate our business model while avoiding our commitment to sustainability." They're positioning themselves as the practical alternative to our approach. Eliza, our CMO, nodded. "Their messaging is clever. They're not attacking sustainability directly, just implying that our commitment to it makes us less commercially viable." The phrase "balancing innovation with market reality" is a direct dig at us. "What can they actually build?" Jason asked. "Daniel knows our processes, but the core technology is patented." Marcus, our lawyer, leaned forward. "That's the concerning part. Patents protect specific implementations, but not broader concepts or approaching innovations. Daniel can't copy our existing technology directly, but he can use his knowledge of our research directions to develop parallel solutions that achieve similar results through technically different approaches. And he knows exactly which technical challenges we've struggled with," Jason added, the implication clear. Daniel could focus Nexus's resources on developing workarounds to problems that had taken us years to solve. "What about the non-compete clause in his contract?" I asked Marcus. He grimaced. "It's complicated. The clause exists, but it has geographical and scope limitations that Daniel's lawyers will exploit, and enforcing it would require protracted litigation that could drain resources we need elsewhere." The room fell silent as the full picture emerged. This wasn't just about Daniel starting a competing business. It was a carefully orchestrated campaign to position Nexus as everything Evergreen could have been without what they would frame as my idealistic limitations. With my father's connections, Axion's funding, and Daniel's knowledge of our inner workings, they presented a formidable threat. "So, what's our response?" Raymond asked, breaking the silence. I stood, moving to the whiteboard. "We fight on multiple fronts. First, legal protection. Marcus, I need a comprehensive review of all our intellectual property and an assessment of our enforcement options if they cross any lines." He nodded, making notes. "Second, market positioning. Eliza, we need to reframe the narrative. Our commitment to sustainability isn't a limitation. It's our greatest strength and unique value proposition. I want a campaign that makes that crystal clear." "I'm already thinking of angles," she confirmed. Third, accelerated innovation. Jason, we need to fast-track the most promising projects in our pipeline. Daniel knows where we were 3 months ago, but he doesn't know the progress we've made since or the new directions we're exploring. "I'll reprioritize the R&D teams today," Jason agreed. "And finally, customer relationships. I'll personally reach out to our top clients to reinforce our commitment to them and address any concerns this news might raise." As the meeting concluded and the team dispersed to their assignments, Sophia called. She had seen the announcement. "This is personal," she said without preamble. "They're not just building a business. They're trying to prove you wrong." "I know," I acknowledged. The question is how to respond without letting it become the kind of distraction they want it to be. By staying focused on what made Evergreen special in the first place, she advised. Daniel and your father are betting that the market prefers compromise over commitment when it comes to sustainability. Prove them wrong. Over the next few weeks, Nexus Energy Systems dominated industry conversation. Their launch was sophisticated and aggressive, with Daniel giving interviews positioning Nexus as the practical innovator in energy storage. Without directly criticizing Evergreen, he consistently emphasized themes of market reality and scalable solutions that implicitly questioned our approach. My father was more direct in his rare public comments, suggesting that idealism without business acumen leads nowhere, and that true environmental impact requires commercial success at scale. The message was clear. Evergreen was a well-intentioned but commercially limited venture, while Nexus represented the pragmatic future of energy storage. The market responded with predictable uncertainty. Our stock price fluctuated as analysts debated the implications of this new competitive landscape. Some of our pending contracts were delayed as potential clients adopted a wait-and-see approach, wanting to evaluate Nexus's offerings before committing to Evergreen's technology. It was exactly the destabilization Daniel and my father had intended. By creating uncertainty in the market, they hoped to force us into a defensive posture, reacting to their moves rather than advancing our own vision. I refused to take the bait. Instead of engaging in a public back and forth that would only amplify their message, we accelerated our product development and deepened our customer relationships. I personally met with our top 20 clients, not to discuss Nexus, but to share our expanded vision for truly sustainable energy storage and gather their input on future innovations. The strategy began to yield results. While some potential clients remained hesitant, our existing customer base expressed renewed commitment to our approach. The Pacific Northwest utility contract proceeded on schedule, providing a powerful case study of our technology's real-world impact. 6 weeks after Nexus's launch, they announced their first product, an energy storage system that claimed 15% greater efficiency than current market alternatives, with a carefully worded commitment to reducing environmental impact. The technical specifications revealed an approach that incorporated some sustainable elements, but relied primarily on conventional lithium-ion technology with incremental improvements. Jason studied their technical documentation carefully. It's exactly what we expected, he concluded. They've taken conventional technology, added a few green features for marketing purposes, and positioned it as revolutionary. The efficiency claims are probably accurate for specific use cases, but they're misleading when applied broadly. Can we counter those claims? I asked. With data? Yes. Our technology outperforms theirs on total environmental impact, life cycle costs, and performance in key operational scenarios. But they've chosen their metrics carefully to highlight their advantages and obscure their limitations. It was classic Daniel, technically accurate, but fundamentally misleading, and effective. The announcement triggered another round of market uncertainty, with several industry publications running comparison articles that accepted Nexus's framing of the competition. Our communications team worked overtime to reframe the conversation, emphasizing metrics that highlighted our sustainable advantage. But in a complex technical field, nuanced rebuttals struggled to counteract simple efficiency claims. However selective those claims might be. The real blow came a week later when we lost a major contract we had been negotiating for months, a nationwide retail chain planning to install energy storage systems in 50 locations as part of their climate commitment. The official explanation cited evolving technology options and a need to reassess implementation timelines, but unofficial channels confirmed they had switched to Nexus after an aggressive pitch from Daniel personally. I called an emergency strategy session with the executive team. We need to change our approach, I admitted. Responding to their moves isn't working. We're playing their game on their terms. What do you suggest? Eliza asked. We stop comparing ourselves to Nexus entirely. Instead, we make a bold move that changes the conversation completely. The plan we developed over the next 48 hours was ambitious, bordering on audacious. Instead of competing with Nexus on incremental improvements to existing technology, we would accelerate the development of our next-generation storage solution, a breakthrough approach we had been researching but hadn't planned to bring to market for another 18 months. The new technology, which we called EverCell, represented a fundamental advance in sustainable energy storage, a completely recyclable system using abundant non-toxic materials with energy density approaching lithium-ion batteries but without the environmental and supply chain concerns. We had proven the concept in the lab, but hadn't yet scaled it for commercial production. "This is risky," Raymond cautioned. "Accelerating development means additional R&D costs we hadn't budgeted for this year. And we'll be making public commitments to technology that's still evolving," Jason added. "If we hit unexpected technical challenges, we could miss announced timelines." "I understand the risks," I acknowledged. "But continuing our current strategy means fighting a battle of perception that Daniel is better positioned to win. We need to change the game entirely." After thorough discussion, the team aligned behind the plan. We would announce EverCell as the future of truly sustainable energy storage, position our current technology as the transition step toward that future, and invite forward-thinking clients to partner with us as early adopters of the next-generation solution. The announcement was scheduled for the annual Clean Energy Summit, where I was already slated to deliver a keynote address. It would give us the perfect platform to shift the industry conversation from incremental efficiency to transformational sustainability. In the weeks leading up to the summit, we worked around the clock to prepare. Jason's engineering team refined the EverCell prototype to demonstrate key capabilities. Raymond secured additional financing to support the accelerated development timeline. Eliza crafted messaging that positioned EverCell not just as a product, but as a paradigm shift in energy storage. 2 days before the summit, I received an unexpected message. My father wanted to meet. Alone. We arranged to meet at a small cafe equidistant between our offices. He was already seated when I arrived, looking older than I remembered, the strain of recent months evident in the new lines around his eyes. "Thank you for coming," he said as I took the seat across from him. "What's this about, Dad?" He stirred, his coffee uncharacteristically hesitant. "I've heard rumors about a major announcement from Evergreen at the summit. I wanted to talk to you before things escalate further." "If you're here to gather competitive intelligence, you're wasting both our time," I said, making a move to stand. "No, Rebecca, please." He gestured for me to stay. "This isn't about Nexus. It's about us. About this situation that's spinning. Out of control." I settled back into my seat, wary but curious. "Go on." "This competition between Evergreen and Nexus, it's becoming destructive. For the companies, for the market, for our family. You and Daniel created this situation," I reminded him. "You tried to push me out of my own company, and when that failed, you established a direct competitor specifically designed to undermine us." He sighed. "I know how it looks, but our intentions were what, exactly? To prove me wrong? To punish me for standing up for myself? To force your vision of practical energy storage on the market regardless of what I wanted for the company I founded? To create something that could succeed at scale," he insisted. "Rebecca, your vision for Evergreen is admirable, but limited. The market isn't ready for the level of sustainability you're demanding. Nexus represents a necessary middle ground." "That's where you're wrong," I said. "The market is evolving faster than you realize. Genuine sustainability isn't a future luxury. It's a current necessity. Companies that recognize that will lead the next generation of energy technology. Those that don't will be left behind." He studied me for a moment. "You really believe that?" "I've built my company on it." "And that's why you won't consider any form of reconciliation between Evergreen and Nexus?" A strategic partnership, perhaps, that combines our approaches? So that was why he had reached out. Not reconciliation, but acquisition. Another attempt to gain control of my technology and vision, this time through corporate maneuvers rather than board politics. There can't be a middle ground between genuine sustainability and greenwashed convenience, I said firmly. That's what you and Daniel never understood. Evergreen isn't just a company to me. It's a mission to transform how energy storage works. I won't compromise that. Not for market share, not for easier financing, and certainly not for family peace. He nodded slowly. Then I suppose we'll see you at the summit. He stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I am proud of what you've built, Rebecca. I just wish you could see beyond your own vision to the larger opportunities. My vision is the larger opportunity, I replied. And after the summit, I think more people will understand that. As he walked away, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness for the relationship we might have had if he had trusted my judgment, determination to prove the validity of my approach, and a surprising sense of clarity about the path forward. The meeting had confirmed what I had suspected. Daniel and my father were concerned enough about our next move to attempt preemptive negotiation. They knew something big was coming. The morning of the summit dawned bright and clear, the Seattle spring offering a rare day of perfect sunshine. The venue was packed with industry leaders, investors, policymakers, and media, the most influential gathering in clean energy technology of the year. Daniel and my father were there, of course, seated prominently near the front. Nexus was a platinum sponsor of the event, their branding displayed prominently throughout the venue. It was a power move designed to establish their dominant position in the industry conversation. My keynote was scheduled for 2 p.m., the prime slot of the day. As I waited backstage, Olivia gave me a final update. Full house, including representatives from every major energy company and investment firm in the sector. The Nexus team is sitting front and center, looking very confident. Let them enjoy it while it lasts, I said, reviewing my notes one last time. As I stepped onto the stage, the applause was polite but reserved. The industry was still processing the emergence of Nexus and the questions it had raised about Evergreen's approach. I could see uncertainty in many faces, a wait-and-see attitude about which vision of energy storage would prevail. Good afternoon, I began. We're here today at a crucial inflection point in clean energy. For too long, we've accepted the false dichotomy between environmental responsibility and commercial viability. We've been told that compromise is necessary, that we can be green or we can be profitable, but achieving both requires settling somewhere in the middle. I paused, making eye contact with my father in the front row. Today, I'm here to tell you that dichotomy is not just false, it's dangerously outdated. The future doesn't belong to those who compromise on sustainability for short-term market advantage. It belongs to those who recognize that true sustainability is the market advantage. For the next 20 minutes, I outlined the fundamental shifts occurring in energy markets, regulatory environments, and consumer preferences, all pointing toward a future where genuine sustainability would be the baseline expectation, not a premium feature. Which brings me to the announcement I'm here to make today, I continued. Evergreen Innovations is proud to introduce Evercell, the first truly sustainable, closed-loop energy storage system designed for the circular economy. The screens behind me illuminated with technical specifications, comparative metrics, and demonstration videos of the prototype in action. The room's energy shifted perceptibly as the implications became clear. This wasn't an incremental improvement, but a fundamental reimagining of how energy storage could work. Evercell uses no rare earth metals, no toxic components, and is designed for complete recyclability at end of life. Its energy density approaches current lithium-ion solutions while eliminating the environmental and supply chain concerns. And unlike systems that simply reduce environmental impact, Evercell is designed from first principles to regenerate the resources it uses. I detailed the performance metrics, cost projections, and timeline for commercial availability. Then, I announced the Early Adopter Partnership Program, offering select companies the opportunity to collaborate on pilot implementations ahead of the general market release. We already have commitments from 3 Fortune 100 companies and 2 major municipal utilities to join this program, I revealed. Together, we're not just improving energy storage, we're transforming it. As I concluded, the room erupted in applause far more enthusiastic than the polite welcome I had received. Industry analysts were already typing furiously on their devices. Investors were engaged in intense conversations, and media representatives were queuing at the press area for follow-up questions. Daniel and my father remained seated, their expressions unreadable from the stage. But their body language told the story, the slight stiffness in their postures, the way they leaned together in quiet conversation rather than joining the excited discussions happening around them. They had expected an incremental response to their challenge, not a paradigm-shifting announcement that fundamentally changed the competitive landscape. The remainder of the summit became a whirlwind of activity. Our booth was constantly surrounded by potential clients, investors, and partners eager to learn more about Evercell. The technical sessions featuring our engineers were standing room only. And most tellingly, the conversations throughout the venue had shifted from comparing Evergreen and Nexus to discussing the implications of the Evercell approach for the entire industry. Late that evening, as the summit's first day concluded, Sophia found me in a quiet corner taking a rare moment alone. That, she said with a smile, was masterful. You didn't just counter their move, you made it irrelevant. That was the idea, I acknowledged. Fighting on their terms meant accepting their framing of the debate. We needed to establish our own terms. Well, it worked. I've spoken with at least a dozen investors today who are questioning Nexus's relevance given what you've announced. One called it yesterday's compromise in tomorrow's market. I allowed myself a small smile. That has a nice ring to it. Daniel looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant during your presentation, she added. Your father was harder to read, but he left immediately afterward without speaking to anyone. They'll regroup and respond, I cautioned. This isn't over yet. No, she agreed, but the momentum has shifted decisively. And in this industry, momentum is everything. She was right. By the summit's conclusion 2 days later, Evergreen had secured commitments from 12 major organizations for the Early Adopter Program, more than tripling our initial target. Our stock price had surged 18%, and industry publications were featuring headlines like Evergreen redefines sustainable storage and Evercell, game changer or industry revolution. More telling was the change in how Nexus was being portrayed. Before the summit, they had been positioned as the pragmatic, market-friendly alternative to Evergreen's idealistic approach. Now, they were increasingly described as a transitional technology, a stepping stone to the truly sustainable future represented by solutions like Evercell. The victory wasn't without costs. The accelerated development timeline for Evercell would strain our resources and create significant technical challenges. The public commitments we had made raised expectations that would be difficult to meet. And Daniel and my father, having been so publicly outmaneuvered, would likely respond with even more aggressive tactics. But as I returned to Evergreen's headquarters after the summit, looking at the energized teams working with renewed purpose, I knew we had made the right choice. We had reclaimed the narrative, re-established our leadership position, and most importantly, reinforced the vision that had driven me to found Evergreen in the first place. That evening, alone in my office, I received a text message from an unknown number. Impressive move today. But remember, the game is just beginning. First to market isn't always last standing. D. I didn't respond. Daniel's message was predictable. A reflexive need to have the last word, to imply that he remained in control despite the day's events. but the fact that he felt compelled to send it at all revealed more than he intended. For the first time since this conflict began, he was reacting to my moves rather than the other way around. The balance had shifted, and I intended to keep it that way. The success of the Clean Energy Summit had given Evergreen a decisive advantage in the industry narrative. For the next several weeks, we rode a wave of positive coverage and renewed investor interest. The Early Adopter Partnership Program had expanded to 15 major organizations, each committing significant resources to implementing Evercell technology in their operations. Our stock had stabilized at its higher valuation, and the cloud of uncertainty that Nexus's launch had created was largely dissipated. But beneath this apparent victory, I harbored realistic concerns. We had made bold promises about Evercell's capabilities and timeline, committing to commercial availability within 12 months. The prototype had demonstrated the core technology successfully, but scaling from laboratory success to mass production involved countless engineering challenges we were still working to solve. Jason's R&D team was working around the clock, their progress impressive but not miraculous. In our weekly technical reviews, he was careful to highlight both breakthroughs and persistent obstacles. The electrode degradation issue is proving stubborn, he explained during one particularly tense meeting. We've improved cycle life by 30% since the summit, but we're still not at the performance metrics we promised for the commercial version. What's the timeline for resolving it? I asked. He exchanged glances with his lead engineer before answering. Conservatively, 3 to 4 months. Optimistically, we might have a solution in 6 to 8 weeks, but that doesn't include testing time. I did the mental calculation. Even the optimistic timeline would put us dangerously close to our first milestone deliverables for the early adopter partners. A delay would not only damage our credibility, but potentially expose us to contractual penalties. We need to accelerate, I said firmly. What additional resources would help? It's not just a matter of resources, Jason cautioned. Some of these challenges require fundamental breakthroughs, not just more engineers working longer hours. Science has its own timeline. I understood his point but couldn't accept it as final. Then we need to look at contingencies. Are there interim solutions that could meet our near-term commitments while we perfect the technology? Jason hesitated. There are approaches we could take. Design modifications that would achieve the promised performance for the initial deployment. But they would involve compromises. What kind of compromises? Reduced recyclability, introducing components that aren't fully sustainable. Essentially, moving closer to the hybrid approach that Nexus is taking. The suggestion landed like a stone in my stomach. The entire premise of Evercell, the reason it had generated such excitement, was its uncompromising commitment to sustainability. Introducing elements that undermined that promise, even temporarily, struck at the heart of everything I had built Evergreen to represent. That's not an option, I said firmly. We won't compromise on the core promise of Evercell. Find another way. After the meeting, Olivia lingered in my office, her expression troubled. You know I support your vision completely, she began carefully. But is it possible Jason has a point? A temporary compromise that helps us meet our deadlines would undermine everything we stand for, I finished for her. We promised a truly sustainable solution, not another half measure. If we start making those compromises now, where does it end? She nodded, but her concern remained evident. I understand. I just worry about the pressure the teams are under. The expectations are enormous. And we'll meet them without compromising our principles, I assured her. That's what makes Evergreen different. After she left, I sat alone in my office, watching Seattle's evening fog roll in from the sound. Had I been too rigid? Was I risking the company's success by refusing to consider pragmatic compromises? The questions unsettled me because they echoed my father's criticisms too closely. For comfort. My phone rang. Sophia calling for our weekly update. How are things progressing with Evercell? She asked after our initial greetings. I hesitated, then decided on full transparency. We're facing some technical challenges. Nothing insurmountable, but enough to create timeline pressure. That's not unexpected with any breakthrough technology, she observed. Are we at risk of missing commitments? Not yet. But we're having internal debates about the best approach to ensure we stay on track. What kind of debates? I explained Jason's suggestion of interim technical compromises and my rejection of the idea. I see, she said thoughtfully. And, is your position purely about principle, or is there a practical dimension as well? The question gave me pause. Both, I think. Practically speaking, if we start compromising on sustainability now, we blur the distinction between Evercell and conventional technologies like what Nexus is offering. We lose our unique market position. That's a valid business concern, she agreed. But there might be a middle path, being transparent with your early adopter partners about the challenges, perhaps adjusting expectations while maintaining the core vision. You think I should preemptively announce potential delays? Not necessarily announce, but having candid conversations with key partners could build trust and give you more flexibility. The suggestion made sense, though it carried its own risks. Revealing technical challenges could be interpreted as weakness, especially with Daniel and my father watching for any sign of vulnerability. I'll consider it, I promised. As if summoned by our discussion, my email pinged with a message from an unfamiliar address. The subject line made my heart skip. Evercell Technical Assessment, Confidential. The message was brief. Rebecca, thought you should see the attached analysis of Evercell's current technical limitations. This is circulating among certain investors. A friendly warning. TR. Thomas Rivera, the same engineer who had warned me about Daniel's plans months earlier. The attachment was a detailed technical document analyzing Evercell's prototype performance and highlighting the exact challenges Jason's team was struggling with. More concerning, it included specific predictions about our likely timeline delays and suggestions that we would eventually be forced to compromise on our sustainability claims. The document's existence was alarming enough. The accuracy of its information was truly disturbing. Someone with intimate knowledge of our R&D progress was sharing confidential details with outside parties, presumably including Daniel and my father. I forwarded the email to Marcus with an urgent request to investigate the potential source of the leak. Then I called Jason. We have a security problem, I told him, explaining the document I had received. Someone on the R&D team is sharing detailed information about our technical challenges. There was a long silence before he responded. I hate to say this, but I'm not entirely surprised. Daniel has been reaching out to several of our engineers with job offers at Nexus, significantly above market compensation, equity packages, the works. Why am I just hearing about this now? The engineers who told me about it did so in confidence. They weren't considering the offers, but they were concerned about colleagues who might be. I've been planning to discuss it with you this week. We need to identify the source immediately, I insisted, and implement additional security protocols for all technical documentation. I'll handle it, Jason promised. But Rebecca, the existence of this leak doesn't change the reality of the challenges described. If investors are already aware of our technical hurdles, we may need to reconsider our strategy for addressing them. He was right, of course. The leak had changed the calculation. If key investors were already aware of our challenges, maintaining absolute silence about them no longer protected us from market uncertainty. In fact, our silence might appear as confirmation that we were hiding more serious problems. The next morning, I convened an emergency meeting with the executive team, Marcus and Sophia, to develop a response strategy. We have two interrelated issues, I began. First, the security breach itself. Someone is sharing confidential R&D information with outside parties. Marcus is leading that investigation. Second, and more immediately important, How do we address the fact that detailed information about our technical challenges is now circulating among investors? The timing is suspicious, Eliza noted. Coming just as we're gaining momentum with Evercell. This has Daniel's fingerprints all over it. Regardless of the source, Raymond said, we need to control the narrative. If we say nothing, rumors will fill the vacuum, potentially causing more damage than the truth. Sophia nodded. I agree. The question isn't whether to address it, but how directly and with what messaging. After extensive discussion, we settled on a strategy. I would reach out personally to our early adopter partners and key investors to acknowledge the specific challenges we were facing, frame them as normal aspects of breakthrough innovation, and reaffirm our commitment to meeting our performance promises without compromising on sustainability. Simultaneously, Eliza would prepare messaging for broader market communication that emphasized the ambitious nature of Evercell's goals and our transparent approach to achieving them. The strategy carried risks, but silence seemed more dangerous, now that the information was already circulating. By taking control of the narrative, we could at least ensure that our perspective framed the conversation. Over the next 2 days, I conducted a marathon of video calls and meetings with our most critical stakeholders. The reactions varied from concerned to surprisingly supportive. Our largest utility partner, who had extensive experience with technology development, actually expressed appreciation for the transparency. We've been down this road with other innovations, their CTO told me. The ones that worry me are those where the developers won't acknowledge challenges until they've become crises. This kind of openness builds confidence, not erodes it. Not all responses were as positive. 2 potential investors who had been close to committing decided to pause for further technical evaluation. And James Peterson from Axion Ventures made a point of letting me know that Nexus was meeting all its development milestones without similar challenges. By the end of the week, the market had absorbed the news with relatively minimal disruption. Our stock had dipped slightly but stabilized quickly. Industry analysts generally praised our transparency while noting the inherent risks in our ambitious timeline. Overall, we had weathered the immediate storm better than I had feared. The investigation into the source of the leak proved more challenging. Marcus and our IT security team implemented enhanced protocols for all technical documentation and communications, but identifying the specific source remained elusive. Several engineers had access to the information that had been leaked, and all denied involvement when questioned. The following Tuesday, I received another unexpected message, this time from my father, requesting a meeting at his office. After our last encounter and the technical leak that had his influence written all over it, I was inclined to refuse. But curiosity won out. What new angle was he pursuing? His office at Nexus Energy Systems occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise, the decor a calculated display of established success, all dark wood, leather, and impressive views. It was designed to project exactly the image he had always valued: power, tradition, solidity. Thank you for coming, he said as his assistant showed me in. I appreciate you making the time. Let's skip the pleasantries, I suggested, taking a seat across from his imposing desk. Why am I here, Dad? He studied me for a moment, then nodded as if confirming something to himself. I've been reflecting on our situation, Rebecca. This competition between Evergreen and Nexus has become more destructive than I anticipated. For both companies, for the market, and especially for our family. If you're suggesting another partnership that would effectively subordinate Evergreen's vision to Nexus's, save your breath. I'm not, he said, surprising me. I'm suggesting something more fundamental, a truce. I raised an eyebrow, skeptical but curious. What kind of truce? One that acknowledges the reality of our positions. Evergreen and Nexus are pursuing different approaches to energy storage, serving different market segments with different priorities. There's room for both visions to succeed without actively undermining each other. That's a significant change. in perspective from someone who recently tried to force me out of my own company because my vision was supposedly too limited. He sighed, rubbing his forehead tiredly. I may have been hasty in my assessment of your approach. Evercell is genuinely innovative, more viable than I initially believed. The market reaction has made that clear. The admission, however grudging, was unexpected. My father rarely acknowledged being wrong about anything, especially business judgments. So what exactly are you proposing? An end to the active competition. No more poaching of each other's talent. No more targeted undermining of each other's technology. We focus on our respective strengths and let the market determine where each approach best fits. The offer was tempting in its simplicity. Though, constant vigilance against Daniel and my father's maneuvers had been draining resources and attention that would be better focused on developing Evercell. A truce would remove a significant source of pressure at a time when we needed to concentrate on our technical challenges. But something felt off about the sudden olive branch. Why now? I asked directly. What's changed to make you suddenly amenable to peaceful coexistence? He hesitated, clearly debating how much to reveal. Let's just say that certain financial realities have become clearer in recent weeks. Nexus's development costs are running higher than initially projected, and some investors are expressing concern about the direct competition with Evergreen, absorbing resources that could be better directed toward market expansion. Translation. Nexus was burning through cash faster than expected, and investors were questioning the wisdom of a head-to-head battle with Evergreen when both companies could potentially thrive by focusing on different market segments. And Daniel? Is he on board with this truce? My father's expression tightened slightly. Daniel sees the business logic, yes. He's a pragmatist. The careful wording told me what I needed to know. Daniel had likely agreed to the truce out of financial necessity, not conviction. His competitive nature and wounded pride would make any peace temporary at best. I'll need to discuss this with my board and executive team, I said, neither accepting nor rejecting the offer outright. And I'd want any agreement formalized in writing, with specific provisions and consequences for violations. Of course, he agreed quickly. Marcus and our legal team can work out the details. As I stood to leave, he added, Rebecca, despite everything, I hope you know I am proud of what you've built. Even when we've disagreed on approach, I've never doubted your capabilities. The words should have meant something. They were, after all, the acknowledgement I had sought from him for years. But they came too late, tainted by all that had transpired between us. I nodded politely but offered no warm response. I'll be in touch about the truce proposal, I said instead. Back at Evergreen, I convened a small group consisting of Sophia, Marcus, and Olivia to discuss my father's unexpected offer. It's suspicious, Olivia said immediately. After everything they've done, why would they suddenly want peace? Financial pressure, according to Walter, I explained. Nexus is burning cash faster than expected, and their investors are questioning the wisdom of a direct battle with us. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. That aligns with what I've heard through industry channels. Their development costs are rumored to be significantly over budget. Even if that's true, Sophia cautioned, we need to consider whether this truce benefits Evergreen strategically. What would we gain, and what would we potentially lose? It was the right question. A truce would certainly reduce the immediate pressure on our teams and eliminate some of the market uncertainty created by the aggressive competition. It would allow us to focus fully on solving Evercell's technical challenges without constantly looking over our shoulders for Daniel's next move. But it would also provide Nexus with breathing room to stabilize their financial situation and refine their technology. The current trajectory had Evergreen gaining momentum while Nexus struggled. A truce might interrupt that dynamic at a critical moment. There's another angle to consider, Marcus added. If we enter formal negotiations for this truce, we gain access to certain information about Nexus's operations and strategy that could be valuable regardless of whether an agreement is ultimately reached. It was a pragmatic perspective, if somewhat Machiavellian. But after all that Daniel and my father had done, pragmatism seemed appropriate. I'm inclined to pursue negotiations, I decided finally, not because I trust their intentions, but because the process itself provides strategic advantages. And if we can actually establish enforceable boundaries between our operations, that's a genuine benefit to Evergreen. Over the next 2 weeks, legal teams from both companies worked to draft a non-aggression agreement that would establish clear boundaries and consequences. The process was revealing in itself. Nexus's lawyers pushed hard for provisions that would restrict Evergreen's marketing claims about sustainability advantages, while resisting similar limitations on their own messaging. They sought broad prohibitions on hiring from each other's companies, but requested special exceptions for strategic roles. Each negotiation point provided insight into their priorities and concerns. Most tellingly, they seemed particularly anxious to establish restrictions on approaching each other's investors and strategic partners, a clear indication that their financial position was indeed vulnerable. Meanwhile, Evergreen's internal situation was evolving positively. Jason's R&D team had made a breakthrough on the electrode degradation issue, improving cycle life significantly without compromising sustainability. We were still behind our original timeline, but the gap was closing faster than anticipated. More encouragingly, our transparent approach with early adopter partners had yielded unexpected benefits. 2 partners had offered their own engineering resources to collaborate on specific technical challenges, bringing fresh perspectives and expertise that accelerated our progress. Far from weakening our position, our openness about the challenges had actually strengthened key relationships. As the truce negotiations neared completion, I received an unexpected visit from Thomas Rivera, the engineer who had warned me about the technical leak. "I hope I'm not overstepping," he said as we sat in a small meeting room away from the main office areas. "But there's something you should know before finalizing any agreement with Nexus." "I appreciate your previous warning," I said. "What's your concern now?" "Nexus is in worse financial shape than they're letting on," he explained. "A former colleague who joined them recently confided that they're struggling to meet payroll. The technical progress they've been claiming publicly is largely smoke and mirrors. They've hit fundamental obstacles with their hybrid approach that they can't seem to solve." "Why tell me this?" I asked, genuinely curious about his motivation. "Because I believe in what you're trying to build," he said simply. "And because I think Walter and Daniel are using these truce negotiations to buy time while they seek emergency funding, or, more likely, prepare for an acquisition offer." "Acquisition? Who would acquire them in their current state?" "That's the interesting part," Rivera continued. "There are rumors that global energy conglomerate is interested, not for Nexus's technology, but for their market position and potential to neutralize Evergreen's disruptive approach. Global Energy Conglomerate was one of the largest traditional energy companies in the world, with vast resources but a poor record on environmental innovation. If they acquired Nexus, they would gain a foothold in sustainable energy storage while potentially using their market power to marginalize truly revolutionary approaches like Evercell. "Do you have any evidence of these discussions?" I asked. "Nothing concrete that I can share," Rivera admitted. "But the timing of Nexus's sudden interest in a truce aligns perfectly with when these rumors began circulating." The information was concerning but difficult to verify. Rivera had proven reliable before, but he was working with second-hand information and industry rumors. Still, it added another dimension to consider in our approach to the truce negotiations. I thanked him for the warning and assured him I would factor it into our decisions. After he left, I sat alone in the meeting room, turning over the implications in my mind. If Nexus was truly on the verge of being acquired by Global Energy Conglomerate, the competitive landscape would change dramatically, and not in Evergreen's favor. The question was what to do with this uncertain information. Should we accelerate the truce negotiations to establish protective boundaries before any acquisition, or should we withdraw from negotiations entirely, focusing instead on strengthening our market position while Nexus was vulnerable? It was the kind of strategic decision that would have significant long-term consequences for Evergreen, for the sustainable energy storage market, and for my own vision of transforming how the world approached energy technology. That evening, I called an emergency meeting with Sophia, Marcus, and my executive team to share Rivera's warning and discuss our options. The debate was extensive and sometimes heated, with passionate arguments on both sides. If there's even a possibility of global energy conglomerate entering the picture, we need to protect ourselves with a formal agreement now, Raymond argued. Their resources could fundamentally change the competitive dynamic. Or we use this moment of Nexus's weakness to press our advantage, Eliza countered. Accelerate our marketing, approach their key clients, and establish Evercell as the definitive future before any acquisition can be completed. Jason offered a third perspective. What if we consider a more radical approach? If Nexus is truly in financial distress, have we explored the possibility of acquiring them ourselves? The suggestion was startling in its audacity. Evergreen acquiring Nexus would be a dramatic reversal of the power dynamic that Daniel and my father had tried to establish. It would bring their technological resources under our control and eliminate the threat of global energy conglomerate entering the market through acquisition. But it would also mean working with the very people who had tried to undermine me, absorbing a company culture built on compromises I had rejected, and potentially diluting Evergreen's clear vision with Nexus's hybrid approach. Even if it were financially possible, Marcus cautioned, the cultural integration would be extraordinarily challenging, and Daniel and Walter would fight any such attempt with everything they have. Unless they have no choice, Raymond suggested. If their financial situation is as dire as Rivera indicates, they might prefer Evergreen's acquisition to bankruptcy or a fire sale to a traditional energy company. The discussion continued late into the night, each option examined from multiple angles, the potential risks and benefits carefully weighed. By midnight, we had narrowed to 3 potential strategies, each with compelling arguments in its favor. As the meeting finally concluded, Olivia caught me in the hallway outside. "What are you thinking?" she asked quietly. "You've been unusually reserved during the debate." I sighed, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on me. "I'm thinking about what Evergreen truly stands for, about the vision that started all of this. And I'm wondering which path best serves that vision, not just in the short term, but for the future we're trying to build. And what conclusion are you reaching?" "That's the thing," I admitted. "For the first time since this all began, I'm genuinely uncertain about the right move. Each option offers a kind of victory, but each also requires compromise in ways I hadn't anticipated." She nodded sympathetically. "You know, when you founded Evergreen, you told me that the hardest part wouldn't be the technology or the funding. It would be maintaining integrity of vision when faced with practical pressures. I think this is that moment." She was right. This wasn't just a strategic business decision. It was a moral crossroads for Evergreen and for me personally. The path I chose now would define not just our competitive position, but the very nature of what we were building and why. As I drove home that night, Seattle's lights reflecting off the rain-slick streets, I found myself thinking not about market share or technological advantages, but about purpose, about the difference between winning a battle and achieving a mission, about what true success would mean in the context of the vision that had driven me to start Evergreen in the first place. By morning, I knew what we needed to do. It wouldn't be the easiest path or the most obviously advantageous in conventional business terms, but it would be true to the core principles that made Evergreen worth fighting for in the first place. I just hoped I would have the courage to see it through, whatever the consequences might be. The morning dawned clear and bright as I drove to the downtown offices of Global Energy Conglomerate. My decision had surprised everyone: Sophia, the executive team, even Olivia. But after a sleepless night weighing our options, I remained convinced this unexpected path was the right one. Rather than continuing the truce negotiations with Nexus or pursuing an acquisition, I had reached out directly to GEC's CEO, requesting an urgent meeting. The massive steel and glass headquarters loomed against the Seattle skyline, a monument to traditional energy dominance. Security escorted me through the marble lobby to the executive elevator, which whisked me to the top floor, where Eleanor Winters, GEC's formidable chief executive, waited in her corner office. Her reputation for ruthless efficiency was matched only by her company's historical resistance to meaningful environmental innovation. At 62, she had navigated GEC through 3 decades of industry upheaval, maintaining its position as a global energy leader despite increasing pressure from climate advocates and regulatory bodies. "Ms. Mitchell," she greeted me, rising from behind an imposing desk of polished walnut. "This is unexpected. Our companies aren't typically on speaking terms." "Circumstances change," I replied, accepting her handshake and the offered chair. "I understand you're in acquisition discussions with Nexus Energy Systems." Her eyebrows rose fractionally, the only indication of surprise from her otherwise composed expression. "That would be confidential information if it were true." "And yet, here we are," I said, maintaining steady eye contact. "Before you finalize any agreement, I believe we should talk about the bigger picture." For the next 30 minutes, I outlined a different vision than the one she had anticipated. Not a defensive plea to preserve Evergreen's independence or a competitive counteroffer, but a bold proposal for industry transformation. I detailed Evercell's capabilities, our development timeline, and most importantly, the market shift already underway toward truly sustainable solutions. Traditional energy companies like GEC face a critical inflection point, I explained. The transition to renewable energy isn't just happening, it's accelerating. The question isn't whether to adapt, but how to lead in this new landscape. Eleanor listened intently, her expression revealing nothing as I continued. "Acquiring Nexus might seem like a logical way to enter the sustainable storage space," I concluded. "But you'd be buying compromised technology that's already becoming obsolete. There's a more visionary alternative." "Which is?" "Strategic partnership with Evergreen. Not acquisition, but collaboration. Your global infrastructure and manufacturing capability paired with our genuinely innovative technology. GEC brings scale and distribution networks. Evergreen brings next-generation sustainability and the credibility that comes with it." She studied me carefully. "Why approach me directly? Why not let us acquire Nexus, then negotiate from a position of necessity? Because real transformation doesn't come from tactical maneuvers. It comes from those willing to make bold choices before they're forced to." I leaned forward. "GEC faces increasing pressure from regulators and shareholders to meaningfully address sustainability. Nexus offers the appearance of change while preserving the status quo. I'm offering something more valuable: authentic leadership in the transition to truly sustainable energy." Eleanor was silent for a long moment, her gaze drifting to the Seattle skyline visible through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Your father and ex-husband would be furious about this conversation. They prioritized control over vision. I'm prioritizing impact over ego. And what guarantees would Evergreen require to protect the integrity of your technology within such a partnership?" The question revealed her interest more clearly than any explicit statement. We spent the next hour discussing specifics: sustainability, commitments, performance metrics, operational independence. I had come prepared with detailed proposals for each aspect, having anticipated her concerns. "This is ambitious," she acknowledged as our discussion concluded. "Perhaps too ambitious for immediate decision. The energy storage market won't—" "Wait," I countered. "Neither will climate realities. And frankly, neither will Nexus's financial situation. Their cash reserves are depleting rapidly. They need acquisition or emergency funding within weeks, not months. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You're well informed? I have to be. The stakes are too high for anything less. She stood, signaling the end of our meeting. I need to consult with my board. You'll have our response within 3 days. I appreciate your consideration, I said, gathering my materials. But I should note that this conversation is exclusive to GEC. If we don't find alignment, I'll be exploring similar partnerships with other entities immediately. It wasn't an idle threat. Before approaching Eleanor, I had arranged preliminary discussions with 2 other potential partners as contingencies. But GEC offered the optimal combination of resources and market position to accelerate Evercell's global impact. As I left GEC's headquarters, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. Emergency at the office. Daniel and Walter just arrived unannounced. Demanding to see you. Jason is stalling them. So they had somehow learned about my meeting with Eleanor. Their information networks were impressive, if not surprising. I texted back. On my way. Don't tell them where I've been. The scene at Evergreen's headquarters was exactly as tense as I had expected. Daniel and my father had commandeered our main conference room, their expressions darkening as I entered. Negotiating with GEC behind our backs? Daniel demanded without preamble. While we're in the middle of truce discussions? How I conduct Evergreen's business isn't subject to your approval, Daniel, I replied calmly, setting my portfolio on the table. Not anymore. My father rose from his chair, his anger barely contained. Do you have any idea what you're doing? GEC will strip your technology for parts and discard everything that doesn't serve their immediate profit interests. Unlike the purely altruistic approach Nexus has taken, I countered, your concern would be more convincing if you hadn't spent the past 6 months trying to undermine everything Evergreen stands for. That's different, Daniel insisted. We understand this industry. We were trying to build something viable, not just idealistic. By stealing our engineers, leaking confidential technical information, approaching our investors with misleading claims? I shook my head. Save the righteous indignation, Daniel. It doesn't suit you. Whatever you think of our methods, my father said, his voice lowering to a more reasonable tone. Partnering with GEC is a catastrophic mistake. They'll use you for green credibility while continuing business as usual. Your technology will be marginalized within their portfolio. There was genuine concern in his voice. Perhaps the first authentic emotion he had shown me in months. It gave me pause, but only momentarily. I appreciate the warning, I said sincerely. But the partnership structure I've proposed includes specific, enforceable protections against exactly those outcomes, unlike the arrangement you 2 planned for Evergreen, which would have diluted our sustainability commitment without any accountability. Daniel's expression shifted from anger to calculation. The truce offer still stands. We can find a way forward that preserves both companies' independence. While you continue seeking acquisition by GEC or another traditional energy company, I asked. The truce was never about peaceful coexistence. It was about buying time until you could orchestrate a more advantageous exit. My father and Daniel exchanged glances, confirming my suspicion. You've become cynical, Rebecca, my father said finally. Not everything is manipulation and betrayal. Coming from the 2 people who secretly planned to remove me from my own company, that's quite a statement. I moved toward the door. If you'll excuse me, I have a company to run. Olivia will see you out. As they left, Daniel paused in the doorway. This isn't over. Your GEC partnership isn't finalized yet. You're right about one thing, I agreed. It isn't over, but not in the way you think. Over the next 48 hours, Evergreen and GEC's legal teams worked feverishly to draft a preliminary agreement. The partnership structure was complex but elegant. GEC would provide manufacturing infrastructure and global distribution for Evercell technology, dramatically accelerating our timeline to mass production. In exchange, they gained exclusive licensing rights for specific market segments. Most importantly, the agreement included strict sustainability commitments and environmental performance metrics, non-negotiable elements I had insisted upon. Evergreen would maintain operational independence and control over technology development, while gaining the resources to scale globally at a pace we could never achieve alone. On the morning of the third day, Eleanor called personally. "My board has approved the partnership framework. We're ready to proceed with formal announcement and documentation." Relief and excitement washed over me. "That's excellent news. Our team is prepared to move immediately on implementation planning." "There's one more thing," she added. "We've been contacted by representatives from Nexus, urgently seeking to restart acquisition discussions." I wasn't surprised. Daniel and my father would be pulling every lever available to derail our partnership. "And?" I prompted. "And I told them we've found a more promising direction for our sustainable energy strategy." I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Sometimes the best negotiations are the ones you walk away from. 2 weeks later, GEC and Evergreen announced our strategic partnership at a joint press conference. The industry reaction was immediate and dramatic. Our stock soared 40% in a single day. Analysts described the partnership as industry redefining and the clearest signal yet that genuine sustainability is the future of energy storage. The Nexus acquisition talks collapsed the same day our partnership was announced. Within a week, they had laid off 30% of their staff as they scrambled to find alternative funding. Their remaining investors were reportedly demanding significant restructuring and a possible leadership change. Daniel sent a scathing text the evening of our announcement. "You've betrayed everything we built together. This partnership makes a mockery of innovation independence. You've sold out to exactly the kind of corporate giant we founded Evergreen to challenge." I didn't respond. His message revealed exactly what I had suspected. His objection wasn't to compromise itself, but to compromise he didn't control. The T. Innovation independence he referenced had been nowhere in his plans to remove me from leadership. My father was more direct, calling me personally the day after the announcement. "You've handed control of your technology to a conglomerate that will inevitably water down your vision," he began without preamble. "Everything unique about Evergreen will be absorbed into GEC's corporate machinery. Actually, I've secured contractual guarantees that protect the integrity of our approach while gaining the resources to scale it globally," I replied. "The enforceable sustainability metrics and performance requirements are unprecedented for a partnership of this scale." "At what cost?" he demanded. "Your independence?" "No, Dad. At the cost of exactly what you and Daniel were willing to sacrifice. The purity of the original vision in exchange for faster market adoption." The silence that followed told me the point had landed. "The difference," I continued, "is that I negotiated this compromise openly, on my terms, with binding commitments to sustainability metrics. You and Daniel were planning to dilute our approach, behind closed doors, without accountability." "You think you've won?" he said finally, his voice strangely subdued. "This isn't about winning or losing. It's about maximizing impact. Sometimes that requires working with those you initially perceive as opponents, but who might be transformed by your vision. GEC isn't going to be transformed by anything except profit motive," he insisted. "Maybe. But they've committed hundreds of millions of dollars and their market reputation to scaling truly sustainable energy storage. Even if their motivations aren't perfectly aligned with mine, the impact of their involvement advances the mission that Evergreen was founded to pursue." After a moment, he said something I never expected to hear. "I hope you're right, Rebecca." The genuineness in his tone caught me off guard. Perhaps, beneath the power struggles and betrayal, some fragment of shared purpose remained. A mutual desire, however differently expressed, to create meaningful change in energy technology. "Thank you," I said simply. "I hope so too." 6 months. Later, I stood on stage at Evergreen's manufacturing facility inauguration. The state-of-the-art complex, built with GEC's resources but operating under Evergreen's sustainability standards, would produce EverCell units at a scale we had once only dreamed of, meeting the exploding demand from utility companies, municipalities, and corporations worldwide. As I looked out at the assembled employees, investors, and partners, I spotted Olivia in the front row, the proud smile on her face reflecting the journey we had traveled together. Sophia sat nearby, her initial skepticism about the GEC partnership long since transformed into strategic support. Eleanor Winters stood to the side, her presence a testament to GEC's commitment to our shared vision. Notably absent were Daniel and my father. Nexus had ultimately been acquired, not by a major energy company, but by a private equity firm specializing in distressed assets. Their technology was being repurposed for niche applications, their grand vision of market dominance discarded in the reorganization. 5 years ago, Evergreen began with a simple belief, I told the crowd, that genuine sustainability and commercial success aren't opposing forces but complementary strengths. That transformative innovation doesn't have to compromise its principles to achieve global impact. Today, we prove that principle at unprecedented scale. The facility would ship its first commercial EverCell units the following week, 3 months ahead of our revised timeline, thanks to the combined engineering resources of Evergreen and GEC. Our technology would soon be transforming energy storage for communities across 6 continents. As I concluded my remarks and the celebration began, I found myself reflecting on the winding path that had led to this moment. The betrayal by those closest to me had been painful beyond measure, but it had also forced me to clarify what truly mattered, not control or vindication, but the realization of a vision bigger than any individual or company. Sometimes the greatest challenges to our purpose come from those who claim to share it. And sometimes the most unexpected allies emerge from those we initially perceive as opponents. The key is remembering what you're truly fighting for, not against whom you're fighting. In the end, the board meeting recording that had exposed Daniel and my father's plan to remove me from my own company hadn't just changed Evergreen's leadership trajectory. It had catalyzed a fundamental re-examination of what success really meant, both for me personally and for the mission I had devoted my life to pursuing. The true measure of victory wasn't maintaining absolute control, but maximizing meaningful impact, whatever unexpected form that might take. As I mingled with employees and partners celebrating our achievement, I felt something I hadn't experienced since those early days in my garage workshop. The pure, uncompromised joy of creating something that mattered. Not because it was mine alone, but because it belonged to something larger, a future worth building, regardless of the personal cost. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.